What's up, everyone, and welcome to the first live stream of 2021. We made it through 2020. Can't believe it. Super excited today for the team. We've got the Waves team here. We got Stacking, one of their top influencers, and we got Sten coming on in a minute. Just a disclaimer for everyone again, we do not take payment for these live streams. We find projects that we love. We find people that we love and that we want to showcase, and we bring them on. Make sure you ask some questions in the chat today. Get in there, whatever questions you have for the team that you want. We'll try to get to all of those at the end. And make sure you subscribe to that YouTube channel. We're getting up there, so appreciate everyone and all those subscribes over the last couple of weeks. We're going to keep bringing on some awesome projects over this year, and we got some fun stuff in store. And before we bring the team on, John, you're going to do the honor of going through some social.
I would love to, Joe. All right, cool. This is exciting because there's a lot to talk about with Waves. So I'm going to go over what we see on LunarCRUSH.com. I'm going to start with the Waves coin detail page. I want to look at 6-month activity because over the last 6 months, we've seen a lot of pickup in social activity as well as price. So during that time, we see that there's been a 403.15 to get that specific percent price return. So congratulations to all the investors out there who got in early on Waves. Along that time, we've also seen some pretty good significant activity on the social side where we're looking at social volume. It's up 39.2% versus the previous 6-month period. When we see some of these spikes, they've gone up to 2,493 social mentions. We have another spike here, 3,021 social mentions. And what that means is it's when individuals reference Waves within social posts. So it could be the ticker, it could be the Waves social channel, it could be Waves platform, Waves protocol. There's a various number of terms. It is not picking up the term waves. So we don't want ocean and rivers, and we don't want any waves in there. So we're very specific about what we're picking up. And the activity's up, so it's pretty good. And within those social posts, those mentions within those social posts, there's been increasing engagement. So engagement's way up, 156%. When we look at that, that's gone as high as 6.7 million engagements within a day, which is pretty nice. What that means is those are retweets, those are comments. If we're talking Reddit, it's upvotes and comments on Reddit. It's YouTube, comments on YouTube videos, all of that. So we're looking at that depth. And that's actually really exciting because that indicates an active participating community. So pretty exciting there. Another thing to look at is that social contributors. So this is not just the number of posts. It's not like one person posting 25 times. This is the number of individuals. So we look at individual users posting social content every day. And that's actually really exciting because we hit, I think this is an all-time high right here, where we had 3,098 unique individuals within a day. So that's pretty exciting, really significant growth. And when we look through, all of that, how does that, just to give a frame of reference, obviously Ethereum is massive, but I wanted to give an idea of what we're looking at here and what stage Waves is in versus, say, Ethereum. It's pretty interesting when you look at the price performance over 6 months.
What the heck?
Right? 403.15% for Waves, 403.17% for Ethereum. Obviously, 137.8 billion versus 612 million, giving it a market cap rank of 50 versus a market cap rank of 2. But that's pretty fascinating. Yeah, and they don't move exactly at the same time. And that's really an important thing to note. I'd love to discuss that even with stacking a little bit in a minute, where, we have to talk about things that maybe don't move together. And I think this is a really interesting, exciting thing to look at, considering they both ended up at the same place. When we look at just social activity, where are we at relatively? We've got, in that 6 months, we have about 64,000 social mentions versus 3.4 million on Ethereum. We have 188.8 million engagements on Waves versus 10.8 billion on Ethereum. So we're talking about a project that's up and coming, and it's much smaller and growing very fast. So I think that's really exciting. When we also talk about all of this data, who's it coming from? Well, we look at the number of when we look at the number of posts that are coming in, we know who those are coming from. And so when we look at those posts, we also look at when we look at the individuals, we look at really objectively who's most influential for each coin. And we see that based upon objective, not our opinion, it's nothing we do, it's all automated. This is not anything we pick. We dictate what an influencer is by engagement, meaning how much engagement does their post get, how many posts have they done, like how frequently active are they, and how many followers do they have, and have those grown within that period of time. And we also look at that through timeframes. So whereas you might be very influential one day, you may not be on the 1 week or the 1 month or the 1 year. And so when we're looking at 6 months, one of the main reasons here we have Stacking on, we're so excited about is he's the #1 influencer on Waves. So really exciting. So he's had a lot of engagement on his Waves posts. He's had a lot of activity. So he's posted about Waves a lot. And he has a lot of followers that are related to Waves. So, so much so that he's ahead of Sasha Ivanov, who's the founder. And so other individuals that have been very influential are Slim Trady, Crypto Boss 1984, Johnny Wu, TradingView, Simon Hayes, and Sandra Waves. Those would be the top 8. Crypto Newton and Coin Mamba. So that rounds out the top 10. And with that,
Cool.
let's bring our guests in.
Boom, boom. What's up, guys? How we doing?
Hey.
Good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. No, really appreciate you guys being on here. We're excited to kind of dig in with you guys about the project, and we were talking a little bit beforehand, and it's not so much a project, it's an ecosystem. It sounds like, and there's a lot of different stuff that you guys are working on. So maybe Sten, you can start us off with where are you in the world today, and how's it going over there?
I'm currently in Belgium. It's pretty rainy. We're expecting snow, so that's the usual winter season here. But it's actually, I wanted to jump in before I dive into what you're asking. It's really super interesting, the metrics that you're showing and how you're looking at it. Because I know sort of and I'm sure we'll dive into that later, but it's interesting to see how those metrics sort of like, sometimes they are pretty spot on in tandem with some of our announcements that we've done. And sometimes there's like almost like a seeming delay, like 2-3 delay, where we hit that, for example, the peak that you mentioned is 2 days after we hit our, let's say, temporary or like year high in December, and it's like a peak 2-3 days later. So it's interesting to see how some of those metrics sort of like either siphon in immediately or sort of like hit a slower rhythm. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. I think what we found is the flow of communication and the flow of news it's different depending on what else is happening out there. Yeah. Right? Are you going to get buried underneath something else, some other macro thing that's happening? You know, if there's a huge Bitcoin announcement or a huge Ethereum announcement, you know, is your PR or is your marketing or is your social going to bubble up? You know, it just depends on what's happening. So those delays, and it's really interesting. So Sten, tell us before we go to stacking, what's your role with Waves and what do you do there?
I think my role is kind of what you've described in a sense just now. It's trying to see how to maximize both from a technical perspective, like more on a high level field, and on a practical communicational perspective, like when to time what and how to bring what messages and how to sort of cohesively bring them in like one type of brand image, but not just from marketing perspective, but also from a more strategic perspective, like how do we get a proper message across and what are people looking for currently. It's sort of, my role inside Waves sort of sprouted from a few conversations in Moscow that we had over dinner, where we just like, how are you guys doing? What's going on in your life? What's going on in mine? And we sort of like, what are your challenges? Where are you facing issues? And I think that was when Waves was closely hitting the 4-year anniversary mark, and their main challenge was kind of what you said just earlier, is like we're seeing that we've been so focused on building technical infrastructure, and Waves obviously comes from being like an ICO in 2016, so they don't have that marketing driven brand image that most of the more recent projects have, which obviously has to, because they come from an entirely different competitive field almost. And that's kind of where they said like, hey, we've been so focused on tech, how do we bring this tech across and make people aware of what we're doing, and sort of get people involved and engaged in making them realize that, yeah, we're sort of the odd duck in the bite in a sense, but then again, some of the things that Waves is doing slightly differently is quite it's quite unique, and it takes some time to catch on. But then we've got those one or two things that really catch on, and then people sort of like get sucked in, and then sort of like start exploring the rest of the ecosystem. That's kind of what happened with stacking as well. Like he just sort of like got sucked in due to a lot of price movements over the summer, and then we sort of started talking and like what are you working on? What are you guys working on? Oh, this is pretty cool. Like, let's do something together. And that's kind of the usual sense of roadmap that a lot of people in our community have.
Right.
Sort of to recap. It's a lot more. I send a lot of cat gifs as well. A lot of funny stories.
Us too. Yeah. So I want to dive deeper into that with stacking. So you say you got sucked in. So what, dive in on that a little bit. What got you sucked in? Why are you, so active in the community, and what really got you excited about what the guys and the gals at Waves are doing?
Well, to be honest, what originally had gotten me sucked in was in late 2018 when everything was bleeding out. I don't even know what the run was. Waves just went parabolic. So from then on, it was just like, I love Waves. It performed great for me. It was like the beginning of decoupling. I always used to make jokes about Chainlink and Waves decoupling because they were just two of the strong assaults at the time that were just going against Bitcoin. And that's kind of when my interest in the project sparks from, just flipping coins and trading to actually figuring out what this is, especially because it's been around for so long. Long enough that their ICO was raised in Bitcoin and not Ether like the usual. And so they've been around for such a long time building. And sometime in Q3 of last year, I approached Sten and Sasha, and I said, this is really cool. I definitely like to, see if there's something that we can do together. So we did, we ran a 1 month engagement campaign together, and, everything just subsided. And I was still trading Waves in and out. And then, as like Neutrino, one of their other projects underneath Waves, USDN, came out, and I was reading more about protocol, Gravity Protocol. I was kind of starting to realize that Waves is more than just a project. It's kind of like a suite of projects. It's like an ecosystem of projects that are, that all fall within it. And then that's when I was like, okay, maybe that's why it's been around for so long, because they're building out so many different projects and features. Because we can talk from about the exchange to the stable coin to Waves, the token. Like there's so many different elements to it, layers to it. And that's when I approached Sasha and Sten and said, how can I really get involved? And this year I'll be an ambassador for the Waves Association, which is Waves's foundation. Per se, like they're all encompassing branch. So I'm excited about that, to work, a lot closer with Waves, especially Sten, Sasha, the CMO Olga, and the head of BD Max. Because also, like, whenever I talk to them, I'm learning something new, like, especially with some of the stuff they're rolling out now. It's very advanced, very technical. That's why I'm been releasing a lot of content lately, trying to break it down so people understand it. Because me, myself, I talk to Sten twice a week about it for hours, and I'm still getting there. So, there's just so much to it, so many different layers to peel that, there's no reason not to see what we can do together. Because, educating the masses, especially in a time like this, where, Bitcoin is, this is unprecedented Bitcoin movement and price action. And where's that all going to flow into all coins?
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about, outside of, price and everything else? I mean, you're an influencer in the space. Obviously you've been in the space a long time. You've probably been approached by other projects to work with them. How do you make that decision on, what to spend the majority of your time on?
Yeah, so to trading and price aside, like what projects do I want to spend the most time on? Well, then it comes, kind of circles back into Waves. Waves, the ticker, or Waves protocol, the Twitter. It's not a project. It's like 5-6 projects in one, and there's constantly evolving initiatives that Sten and the rest of the team are working on. So there's a few other projects that I work closely with. But in terms of, top 50 coins or 2016, 2017, OG altcoins, Waves checks off a lot of boxes that any trader, investor, speculator, or someone who just wants to learn, because whether it's interoperability, a very dynamic stable coin, there's just a ton of features to it. So, it was a no-brainer for me. And, having them be around for so long and with this environment with, all these Uniswap scams and all these errors in the code that aren't errors, working with a project like this, that, it just also provides a level of comfort.
It's funny that you say this, actually, because what you're describing is like, if I circle back like to the start of our year, when I sort of came on board and it was working initially mostly with Sasha and Max, like trying to understand what everything is that they have in the pipeline, everything that's coming, everything that they have been working on, like behind closed doors, something that like some of the core members in the team didn't even were fully aware of. And it was very interesting because my main challenge was sort of like, I see that there's this massive infrastructure that's coming where there's so many moving parts and all of them have a very specific purpose, but you have to be very knowledgeable in like understanding how blockchain is probably going to evolve in the next coming months, quarters, years, to really grasp like what they were trying to achieve and how their vision is sort of like shaping and where it's different from other ecosystems. And what Stacking is describing is precisely what we were challenging or what we're facing back then. What the challenge was like, how do we bring that message across of there's so many different moving parts. Some of them have their own token, some of them don't, some of them are more like a DApp. How do we make sense to people? Like, because if you ask people like what does the ecosystem of Ethereum look like and why is it like, for example, why is Ethereum growing like so much currently? People will have a pretty good understanding of why that is, because they well, it's used for XYZ and like it's growing here and this is where it's different from Bitcoin. People get that. But with Waves, it's, well, it's been different. People don't really get that same sense of like clearly defined core foundational protocols that sort of allow something to be built on top of. And whereas Chainlink, for example, has a much clearer image of this is precisely what we're doing, and I think people have a pretty good understanding of what Polkadot is doing, and Cosmos is probably like likewise. I think they're pretty very well defined, and with Waves, I think they're pretty well defined as well, but they just didn't care that much about marketing, and they were so focused on like how do we build, how do we like bring some of the cool stuff in the limelight, and that it's fun to see that Stacking sort of like experience it from the other perspective. It's quite nice. Yeah.
And like I just have to touch on it again because in like 2018, it's the biggest bear market. Everyone's bleeding out.
True.
Everyone's bag. And Waves and Link were the two coins that were just decoupling. Just going on their own mission. And this time around, when Alts are supposed to be doing well, I'm not going to miss out from Waves from a technical standpoint, and from a fundamental standpoint, they're doing so much, and some of the projects don't even have tokens, which just incentivizes me personally to want to hold more Waves. There's interoperability protocols where there's no token, that doesn't grant Waves any advantage of another project to work on it. So if I can't buy that token, I'm just going to add to my Wave stack. So for me, it's just been a no-brainer. And then I'm
still surprised you haven't changed your name to Stacking Waves, because that's all you've been doing recently.
Well, you guys keep talking like, and we've read through the site and everything, and we were in depth on it a little bit, but it's, something that was interesting was launching a project like it's a web app, right? Like I really liked that language, and so maybe you guys can, instead, maybe you can just talk about a little bit of, how does some of this stuff work? Like how would LunarCRUSH, for example, utilize that and launch something, or someone else that's trying to build? I mean, how does it start?
I guess this is you trying to summarize all of the messages that we've, or you're asking me to summarize everything that we've tried to bring across in the last year,
or at least just start picking a couple of things.
Yeah, I think what struck me the most, nice synchronized drinking, by the way, both.
Yeah, I know, I saw that.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't even looking up. I just drank. Wow.
Yeah. I think what for me was the most interesting, and I usually look at at other projects, like if I'm investing into something or I'm evaluating a project, I usually look at like what's the added value of a protocol, and what are they trying to achieve, and if they're trying to achieve something different, like how do I anticipate that this is going to be used and this is going to be important, and I think that's where Waves has their sort of like their own approach, and it's what stuck with me the most when I was getting to learn more about it is at the center of that entire ecosystem is like the core Waves protocol, which is like proof of stake blockchain, least proof of stake in that sense. It's, I mean, compared to Ethereum's fees right now, it's obviously like black and white type of different universe. It's super fast. I literally just before the stream did a swap between Waves and USDN, like literally a minute before we went live. And it takes like a minute to show up on my wallet. So it's super quick. There's
Can you
some
talk about
advantages to that.
proof of stake real quick? Just kind of define that for
Sure.
everyone.
Yeah. I mean, it's proof of stake in the sense of what people will think about proof of stake, but the least part is that essentially you can lease your coins to a node, but they don't essentially leave your wallet. So you're always in control of your own stack of Waves in that sense. But you can, without having to like have a minimum amount of tokens, you can lease any amount of tokens to any node, and they will essentially verify the blocks for you and then share your reward with you.
Gotcha.
But you always stay in control of your coins. That's where the bigger difference lies in that channel.
And then this is kind of where I think what separates Waves from a lot of other blockchains or just crypto projects in general is we could cut the live stream off now in 22 minutes and we just describe the whole thing. But within Waves, there's Gravity Protocol, there's Waves Exchange, there's Neutrino. And those are like three components for me personally that were, all right, this is different. Like I'm sure Sten will dive into USDN, which is the stable coin on Neutrino, and the APY and the different and the dynamics there. Like that's just one of the many features like that you can utilize then on Waves Exchange. And then, you know, Gravity Protocol doesn't have a token. So, and the way it's structured is Waves doesn't have an advantage over other protocols. So like that's kind of where it differentiated for me is that, you know, it's not a project. There's just so much to it. And
so
you know,
talk a little bit about, I mean, maybe Stacking, you can talk about it, or Sten. I mean, what's Gravity?
I mean, to really dive into it, like Gravity is sort of the answer that Waves was looking for when they were asking themselves the question, like, how do we bring, assuming that we're pretty confident about like everything that we have, and we know that some of the products and apps that we're building, they will catch on at some point. Assuming that we know this, how do we bring this to a bigger audience? And obviously, I mean, the logical response is like being interoperable. But they also said like, if we bring that interoperability too close to our own ecosystem and there's too big of an advantage for Waves in a sense, we're essentially blocking ourselves off. It's a very different view from what like any other interoperable protocol is doing, because they're essentially saying, we're gonna pull everything to like one chain and everyone sort of like goes through one thing essentially. And Wave says, well, that makes sense. But if there's then any token or any financial benefit gained because of the purpose itself of interoperability, the functionality itself, if that is tied to a token or a project, it's naturally going to pull, like to push some people away and say like, well, we do want to have a bridge into an interoperable ecosystem, but we don't want to like be facing within like some kind of a monopoly face-off, because we all know how tribalism in our industry works, and it's cool as long as everyone is making money and everything is going up. But when there's a point where it's like one versus the other, and it's like one interoperable ecosystem versus the other one, people are essentially literally underwriting the ecosystem with their money, not just with their minds. Or it's more than just my stake in that ecosystem, because my stake is literally money. Of course, it has other features, but that's the danger of like stacking functionalities on top of like governance and value transfer and data and collateral, because everything is one. And that's where Wave sort of said, like, we don't want to be running into any of those future issues. So how can we sort of preempt that issue and solve it differently, because Waves doesn't want to, like, they don't need to gain from having that interoperable functionality built into Waves protocol. They need to gain, or they want to gain, from literally growing their ecosystem, growing the access to their ecosystem. So they said, okay, how can we solve interoperability, keeping that in mind? And that's kind of what Gravity is. Gravity is, it's a protocol, set of smart contracts with a Tendermint core in the middle, allowing for communication, but there's no token. You essentially use all the tokens of all the respective ecosystems that you're connected to. So I could pay for something in ETH for something that's going through Gravity and going like between multiple other chains. Of course, that entails that you need a proper wrapper system, but the idea itself means that any developer or any user doesn't face any actual secondary layers of another token to like go about his business, whether he wants access to data or whether you want to whether that would be used for a DeFi. Like, you essentially literally take away an additional layer of complexity. You just remove the token. And it changes the ecosystem also.
You talk about that kind of tribalism, and my question, and then you answered it, was, well, the way to get rid of it was that to pull the token out, and it sounds like that kind of is the way to do it, because the market is just inherently, people when they put their money somewhere, that's kind of where it's like, hey, this is my team.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's. I mean, it literally. I love the Polkadot white paper, but somewhere at the end, it says we don't foresee anywhere in the near future that Ethereum and Polkadot will be like competing directly with each other. But how long is that near future, like stay near future? At some point, I think, and it's not bad. It's just a different approach. And I think Waves took that approach of, we don't need to win the battle of interoperability. We want to win the battle of actually bringing products towards people that work. And however we do that, we just want to maximize that potential. And I think that's kind of what they've tried to go for. And when I realized that sort of like approach, for me, that was a very clear signal of, okay, this is really all about bringing what they've built to a larger audience. And this is not about like trying to make this into a monetary gain type of perspective of like, oh, we have interoperability, everyone buy our token because it's going to go up. That was like a very different approach. And
it's more open and more inviting. And that's why it's unique, because any chain can come on and they can't say, oh, Waves has an advantage because of XYZ, because the protocol is built in a way where it's an open, inviting ecosystem where no chain, including Waves, has an advantage over another.
What kind of adoption have you guys seen with Gravity?
I mean, over the summer, right before we went into our testnet, I think in probably around like 25 projects currently. Gravity's partnered up with Tron, Ontology, Fusion, Phantom,
Binance Smart Chain.
Cool. We currently have there's interoperability for or like cross-chain transfers for USDN between Binance Smart Chain, Tron, Ethereum, and Waves essentially, and it's pretty cool to see. The list is growing. We have some partnerships in the works. But of course, it takes a while because it requires like actual integrations. It's not a like paper type of announcements. So some of the announcements that we have coming are essentially waiting for the groundworks to be done, so that we can like announce some of the things when they're ready. So that's it's pretty fun. And for me, and I think you guys were showing the website earlier. I think if you show the website, the homepage, it sort of works pretty well, because Gravity is sort of like the glue in between all those different, whether it's like Waves protocol or Neutrino protocol, which also, it's that funky, weird picture here. Gravity is literally sort of it's the black hexagon. It's kind of literally the portal between what Waves and Neutrino are doing, where Neutrino is actually built on top of Waves protocol, which is a bridge through Gravity into all of the other let's say, interoperable and DeFi ecosystems, whether that's Ethereum or like any of the list that you want to name. It's sort of a bridge, and
It's
it
like a
doesn't have
two-way
to be a bridge for
portal.
Waves. It
It's like
could
a-
very well be that it's like it's going to be the like mainly used between Ethereum and Polkadot. Who knows?
Right.
Or like Waves doesn't have a hold over it. It's just they see this as the best way forward, and it's pretty interesting. I know of no other project that's essentially doing the opposite of what made blockchain big, like put everything into a token and then you can throw some money at it, people speculate on it, and then it goes up, gains traction, and then people talk about it. It's like the opposite approach.
Yeah, and that's not going to work anymore, at least, specifically in the US. And, I was just kind of yesterday, I mean, I read through the entire, argument against Ripple yesterday, word for word, all 71 pages. And
Wow.
essentially it was just 71 pages of the Howey test, right? And a big piece of that was use, right? Like finding use for things after the fact, outside of a lot of other stuff that happened. But you can't do that. You can't speculate. You can't do these things. You have to have a use for what you're working on. Or essentially it's not the future cryptocurrency that we're thinking of. It's a security. So it sounds like you guys have already passed through that, which is awesome. I did want to talk about, these fees on Ethereum. Excuse me. And I mean, because it's like, John and I our heads are down into LunarCRUSH. We're building its product, its marketing, it's all these things. But once in a while you interact with, your MetaMask and Ethereum. And we did a really cool thing with like Ocean Protocol with some of our data. And then yesterday, for the first time, someone had made us like an NFT, like a really cool video, and they transferred it to us on OpenSea, and it was $8 for them to transfer it to us. And then, I had to take some DAI and move it over to Ethereum. That was $30 to move $50. And then to post it onto OpenSea, it was $51. So to get an NFT that I just wanted to like give away basically cost like $100. And it's like, that is just, it's moved from, not scalable to just not even applicable. Like it's not,
Exactly.
no one will even do that. So it's like, how fast do you guys think these projects are going to start moving off of Ethereum if they're not too ingrained into what they're doing? I mean, are you guys seeing any of that already? Like people trying to migrate and do stuff, and where do you guys kind of cross that in, your everyday?
I mean, it's really a fascinating topic here, because I'm just scrolling through. Like I said, like right before the stream, I did a transfer. Like I swapped between the neutrino contracts, and I paid 0.005 waves for something that took me less than a minute.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, it's a few pennies essentially, and that's just how it works. And of course, Ethereum sort of hopes to move into a similar structure, I guess, at some point. But you know what the challenge is here?
Isn't ETH 2.0 just more expensive fees?
It's going to take a while. It's going to take at least a year.
That's the one issue I have is before the fiscal year just ended, I was converting some Tether and some other coins I had on MetaMask into USDC to bring to Coinbase and cash out. And I had X amount of USDC, and USDT Tether, and to swap from Tether to USDC, I was paying like a couple grand to swap from a one-to-one coin to another one-to-one coin.
It's wild.
Wow.
Yeah, and if you want to speed it up, you have to pay an extra $25. So that's definitely an area where Waves' fees are kind of are they concretes then, that they're always stagnant, they're always the same?
It's always the same. You know what the issue is here is it's not so much about having something. I've seen so many projects even in like late 16 that were already branding themselves as we are the Ethereum killer. We've all seen like the Ethereum killers over the years that have sort of like positioned themselves. You know what the issue is? It's really not about like how good your chain is or how fast or how much better it is on paper. It's also about like what do people use? What are people using, and what are they confident like in what's inside their usual habitat? And then more so, it's also like, where do people make money? It's the same with the whole exchange growth, like the whole story of like competing exchanges in like, let's say 17 and 18. People went to the exchange where they could make the most money, whether that was because that exchange listed a specific coin that no one else did, or whether it was the first exchange that they could dump their ICO bags on. Like it was essentially, where can people make money? And that hasn't changed. It's just, it's went from centralized exchanges to like on-chain activity. But everything is happening inside ETH. It's not because it's like the best chain or the fastest or the cheapest, definitely not. But it's more about like, which of these protocols is facilitating the largest amount of people to make the largest amount of cumulative money. And that's still Ethereum. And that's not going to, I don't see that changing anytime soon, because of like, let's just assume like, Joey, like to try, like, do we see people move over into like, let's say waves? What do you need for that? Like, you would need a seamless experience inside of like, ideally in a website or like a wallet that fully seamlessly allows people to transfer like assets from like an Ethereum based wallet into a Waves based wallet. And then you would have to have a similar amount of like dApps that stuff like Curve, stuff like Compound, like you would need all those Lego blocks to be existent inside Waves as well. And then you would need a similarly, let's say, sizable amount of people using that already for you to get like the built-in base borrowing and lending APY essentially, because that's where everyone's interest is coming from. So if you don't have, like, it doesn't work to just have the technicals. I think many projects have the technical stuff ready, and many projects have the let's say semi-decent wrappers that work relatively seamlessly. I think Flamingo was a relatively good example of like how easy it could theoretically be to like swap assets from like one chain to another and then do something with it. I think that was the first like great example of like the, let's say, the bigger chains, but it just doesn't suffice. People need real use in order to swap, or they need to be able to make a lot of money. It's a bit of both.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of like Stacking and I had quite some conversations over the last few months around like how Neutrino works and why it's like so properly placed to like break that chicken and egg problem of people want to be able to make money, and if they can make money, they might move from like one chain to another. But usually you need already quite a sizable amount of people using something if you're generating your APY from like a lending borrowing based type of structure. And that's kind of where Neutrino is different. And I don't want to dive too far into the technical side, but earlier when I explained like the least proof of stake, it essentially means that you're generating roughly 5 to 6% APY per year in waves. So let's say I stake 1,000 waves. I stake it for a year. At the end of the year, I will have generated roughly like 1,060 extra waves. Like that'll be my wallet balance. Now, how Waves has like essentially, okay, if we want to be a pillar in the like the ecosystem, we need a stable coin. They don't believe in like fully fiat backed stable coins in that sense for like DeFi to really make sense. So they said, how can we create an asset that is backed by Waves, where you essentially get a one-to-one transfer where I send in, let's say, 1,000 Waves into the smart contract, and currently Waves is, let's say, $6. So I have $6,000 worth of Waves. Very different with how Compound works, for example, is when you stake something or with not Compound, Maker, you generate DAI essentially, like you issue DAI, you still retain control over the Ethereum. Here it's entirely different. You essentially send in something, and the contract acts as a one-to-one liquidity contract, or like exchange swap. So I send in 1,000 waves, I get like 6,000 worth of waves back, which is 6,000 USDN. That happens almost instantaneously. That happens like in like one block, which is roughly 1 minute. And that's it. I no longer own that waves, but I now own that USDN. But the waves is owned by the contract. And the contract automatically stakes all of the waves that they get. So it auto stakes everything, and then it automatically starts compounding the interest of all the least proof of stake block rewards that are being paid out daily. So you're generating, let's say, 6% in waves block rewards on all the waves collateral that's sitting in the contract.
So just to clarify, what you're saying is I could hold $6,000 worth of USDN stablecoin, and I'm generating that return on waves back.
Yes, exactly. Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. Yeah. And the reward is generated in waves, but every time the reward is generated, it's again automatically converted into USDN, and you get your payout daily in USDN. But this only happens to people who are staking the USDN. And that's where the disproportional APYs comes from. Because not everyone is staking USDN. A lot of people are like trading it. They're holding it in an exchange. Like usually if everyone would be staking, you would get like close to a 6% like payout on USDN as well. But the difference here is that the waves price does fluctuate. So very often we see, because we saw quite a big amount of USDN being issued in like earlier stages over the summer when waves wasn't that high. So currently I think we have around like 31 or 32 million waves sitting in the contract, which is, let's say, $200 million. But the total supply is around like 115, we peaked to like 135 a few weeks ago, but it's like 115 million USDN. So there's roughly 200 million worth of waves generating 6% in the waves, which is being paid out, but not everyone is staking. So you get these APYs of like 11, 12, 13, sometimes 16, 17% yearly on holding a stablecoin.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Sten. USD, the USDN pool, is it still the highest yielding pool on Curve?
As far as I know, yes. So that was a pretty interesting, I don't know, like catalyzing event almost. Like we ported over the summer, we ported waves into Ethereum. So we said like, we know that, and it kind of like the reasons for that were the conversation that we had just earlier. Like, why do people go to some like other project if there's barriers, like you need to cross or break those barriers? So we just like, we'll break the bridge and we'll create that bridge ourselves. So we just put like a Ethereum version of USDN that automatically compiles all the interest. And we started like integrating it over the summer into some of the DeFi protocols, and Curve integrated it. And very quickly, people started using all their Curve or their V curve to essentially vote for the USDN pool, because there was this underlying interest in the asset of USDN that was built in that no other asset essentially had. Because the yield coming from the, let's say, least proof of stake block rewards, which was still being generated on Waves blockchain, was higher than any of the yields that you could generate from any borrowing or lending based structure for USDT, USDC, like name it. So that was already generating higher rewards for that pool. And then on top of that, the people kept voting with like a lot of V curve, which like drove up the liquidity gauge for the curve rewards. And that sort of became like a positive feedback spiral, and it very quickly, in less than 2 months, like the curve pool grew to, I think we peaked probably at like just shy of 100 million USDN on Ethereum in the curve pool.
Wow.
So that went very quick, because it was essentially a good example of like, create something that generates money, but you bring it inside people's like comfort zone where they don't have to,
a large ecosystem that is the community of Ethereum. So it seems like that's the bridge.
Yeah, exactly. That's like the example of what interoperability should look like. Rather than trying to pull people into your own ecosystem, it's more about like trying to make it work, and then we can figure out if we want to bridge people, like, because that's not the point. We don't care if it's like inside Waves or inside like whatever. If Stacking wants to make his own chain and if it works there, that's fine.
Yeah. So I know we got about 10 minutes left. I want to kind of move it back a little bit to social and Stacking.
Sure, yeah.
And just, you know, so you're out there Stacking, you're posting, you're talking about this a lot. What is some of the feedback and what are some of the questions that you get from your followers, or like outside of, you know, when price go up type stuff? I mean, or is that what people are looking at? I mean, what are people asking you regularly about Waves?
When's the price going to go up? Which is you know, a comment that, you know, has definitely been ignored a lot. A lot of those questions, especially as, you know, these no coiners as they're called, are flowing into the space. There's definitely been a lot of, you know, when this, when that. But when I've been doing a lot of content curation, which involves me and Sten talking for hours about the protocol, and I'm still, you know, I'm probably about 80% of the way there. So like when I do post something on Waves or something on Neutrino, I am starting to get comments from core community members that are kind of adding on to that, and then that kind of has been snowballing into, well, what is that, or what does that mean? Because like with like USDN, you know, people, you know, don't really tweet about stable coins often because it's just a storage. You know, you just want to store one-to-one if you're bearish or whatever the case may be. But you know, lately, you know, I post a lot of Wave stuff. I've been, you know, it's been doing well for me, so I've been very vocal about it. You know, I got a little bit of hate when, you know, Bitcoin decided to tear the market apart. But you know, I can only do so much. A lot of questions have been around price, but a lot of questions have also, a lot of messages and comments have been about, you know, like I said, 2018, there was that, you know, premature decoupling per se. That's what I like to call it, where, you know, Waves was doing its own thing in 2018. And even when Bitcoin was taking a little bit of a hit or retracing, Waves was holding its own the last few months. You know, obviously this, you know, this tear to 35,000 has been a blow to, you know, 99.9% of the projects, but, you know, Waves has found a way to, you know, almost stabilize itself during Bitcoin carnage, whether it's up or down. So people are, you know, that's a very attractive thing, is, you know, whether especially as a day trader, because you're constantly looking at this stuff, is, you know, the Waves Bitcoin pair, you know, for the most part has really just kind of, when Bitcoin is going crazy up or down, it's just hanging on. So the USD value is hanging on as well. So I'm kind of, you know, I'm under the impression, or I'm hoping that, you know, we kind of get that same kind of late 2018 run, you know, this year, once, you know, Bitcoin cools down a little bit. So yeah, you know, a lot of questions.
I think we're seeing it a little bit already.
We are, yeah.
Yeah,
And you guys mentioned Chainlink earlier. I think that's a really good example. It was sitting still. You wake up today and it's way up, and you just never know. And I find it really funny because everyone's got the, you know, in crypto, I've never seen it like this in anything that I've ever done before. But like the dopamine rush of trading is just absolutely insane.
Yeah,
you know,
it's insane, Tom. Yeah.
And you see, you know, like take Bitcoin, right? I mean, sure, there's these kind of large swing trades you maybe could have done over time, or you could have just bought and bought and bought and bought, and you'd be in the money no matter where you are. So it's kind of funny to see. I mean, people place these huge bets and they're trading an hour later, and then they're buying again an hour after that, and they're trading again. And there's
just so much worth trading. It's like there's so much fluctuation and opportunity, and
and when Bitcoin is like dumping 1,000, dumping, it's not even dumping, it's like 3% move. When Bitcoin's moving $1,000, $2,000 in either direction, and Wage is just stagnant. I mean, to me, that's like, oh, well, you know, this is going to be a buy. You know, every other altcoin is retracing, and Waves is just sitting there, like waiting for, like it just sits there and waits. So from like a purely like, you know, like a beginner stance, like, you know, the token, as you know, as a token, it just sits there. You know, you know, I don't know. I just don't see many coins. There are a few coins like that lately that have just been on a tear. You know, especially the Coinbase ones, as new money's flowing in and people are picking up some of the ones listed there.
Right.
But maybe there's 10, 15 coins that at most 10, 15 coins that I've seen that can hold a similar price structure to Waves, whether Bitcoin is doing whatever. Like a good, I'd say aside from Sir One Target or What Target One Moon, the biggest comments have been Waves gives zero F's about BTC price action. It just sits there.
Sometimes it doesn't. Yeah, it's just like it doesn't budge. Or when like BTC is going down, sometimes that might mean that Waves is like drastically going up. And if BTC is going up like slightly, Waves will be like, you know what? Let me like hold my beer. Let me show you how it's done.
So I want to bring out a point. I showed you guys earlier how Waves moved at a time when Ethereum was not, so didn't care about Ethereum's moves either. And when you look at what does correlate to Waves price movements, it's social activity. In fact, even right now, we rank it, we call it a correlation rank. And we look for those social moves and we look for the price moves and we see when they kind of pair together. I mean, right now it's 4 out of 5 and it's gone as high as 5 out of 5. So to say
I'm
that,
not surprised. Yeah,
it moves in tandem. There's a lot of coins that we see move at like 2.5 or 2. Social isn't quite as correlated, or it's almost even inversely correlated. But Wave seems to work together with the community. I find that pretty interesting. And if you think about that, aside from didn't care about Bitcoin's price move, didn't care about Ethereum's price move, it moved on its own along with social activity.
That's kind of, I think it's consistent with what we feel internally. We have like a pretty weird and funny community. Like sometimes some people, like the closest people to the community will be shouting the loudest, and you never really know whether they're going to be like super extremely happy about something, or they will be taking like a piss on you because they think, why are you doing this and why are you doing that? But the engagement it's always as if people think that Waves is much more important than their wife or girlfriend or boyfriend or because it feels there's this certain intensity in the Waves community. It's also because a lot of people, like some of the older people in our community, they've been around since at least like, let's say 16, 17. So they've seen already like at least one cycle. Some people have seen like 2 cycles, and some of them have even seen like 3 full cycles before this one. So you have some people that have like some weathered opinions, and we see that whenever we post out some news, we see some inconsistent engagements, and that's where it's interesting to see how sometimes it's like spot on when we see those price moves and the price is moving up, and like you see the social activity being in tandem, and then you see this misalignment in other moments where it's not about the price, but it's more about like some unique moments or like announcements that we do from a technical perspective. It's very interesting to see how this like activity is being driven.
So we had a really interesting discussion last night with Cointelegraph on a different session, and it was talking about media's really where does media fit into the crypto space. And our argument a bit is that it's much more socially driven than it is media driven. And as a company, you get these releases out, right? And
but who reads it? Like
that's right.
I don't know. Has any of you ever read an article and go like, you know what, I'm going to buy this coin?
No.
About Waves, maybe.
No.
Don't lie.
You know what? I probably read an article and sold. Probably not purchased, but I might have read something that was like, wow, I need to dump this. But never wow, I need to buy this right now, because you're buying hype, and that's not what you do.
I do think it's more about social interactions, and like that's one thing I commend Sasha for is if I tweet a Waves cash tag, he likes it before the guys who have notifications on for me. I swear.
Yeah.
Some of my buddies too. They may have.
You might have a bot going.
No, you'd be surprised. I sometimes wonder how he does it. It's probably one of the things that I like respect him for most. Like I think he's managed to clone himself or something. I don't know, really. Maybe that's the secret of Waves. Like he manages to like look over his social media like literally faster than anyone else.
Like a hawk. It's insane. Like
he's in pretty much every meeting. He's always both at the same time complimenting someone and shouting at someone. Like he's always giving pointers. And it sort of shows. It's fun. I think Stacking had a few like fun interactions with him as well. Like it's fun to see how driven he is. There's never a moment where he doesn't really reply. Like you can text him at 3 a.m. in the morning, and odds are that he's gonna like correlation would say that 4 out of 5 he's gonna like probably reply immediately.
It's actually on Christmas we had like a 45-minute phone call. I just hit him up out of the blue. I was like, is it okay if we? I was like, yeah, don't worry about it. And I was like, wow.
Yeah, but
this is
I told
weird,
you why, because they don't celebrate Christmas then.
Yes.
They celebrate it later. They celebrate it today, actually.
Like,
Well,
and like with LunarCRUSH, with the
Go ahead.
LunarCRUSH stats, I've been ranked in front of Sasha, so I've been sending him DMs about that, screenshots. I don't know if he appreciates it or not, but I have a chuckle at it.
Braggable. Well, it sounds like the community and it, it's holding, if the price is holding against Bitcoin, it's because people aren't selling because they have,
exactly.
They have
absolutely.
commitment to it. Yeah. And they have,
it's also a lot of our core people have been with us for so long. They're not really looking at like, when can I sell? We did see like a lot of people sort of leaving the ecosystem from a big holding perspective, like over the summer, because a lot of people weren't really like, it's like this first run up after a long bear market, and people are like happy to sell like any big profits.
Yep.
But we've seen like a lot of like really big core members. We have like a fun core group of like, let's say 20, 25 people of like the old school people who have like sizable bags, and like no one really ever sells there. Like it's more like rather than wake me up when September ends, like tell me when we hit $100. like I'll like, yeah.
Well, it's like what John said, like how you got me into the space, John, and you said it's always about earning more Bitcoin, right? And right
it's not about dollars. It's not about stacking USD. It's about stacking BTC.
I get that comment a lot.
Yeah.
All right, guys, we do have to wrap it up here, but we did have one question, and I think it's probably more of a clarification from Wachi Yayo. He says, "What the hell? Just saw a Wave site USD annual interest Is that negative? I think he's saying
average, probably. So what's happening here is we saw a request from people saying like, how can we like help, let's say, what's happening inside Curve? So we have that Curve pool where a lot of liquidity is generating like the highest yield inside the Curve pool, and there's a few other pools that sort of like have a benefit between USDN and USDT or USDC or DAI. And we essentially said like, hey, why don't we give some of the requests, because we've received some people asking like, hey, can we do like Tether staking in a similar way as we can do USDN staking? And we said like, well, you can't. But then we sort of got thinking and said like, why don't we create sort of like an automated bridge where automatically we take Tether from people and deploy it into the most profitable pools that are also at the same time benefiting the Waves ecosystem. So a lot of the return will be coming from, for example, like deploying the Tether at the right moment in like the Curve pool, for example. Mm-hmm. And that's where the 60% is coming from, because the pool is just so profitable because of that combination between USDN and then the Curve rewards. But a lot of people thought it was too complicated. And it's funny, actually, a lot of the people inside the Waves ecosystem are, in some cases, fully ignorant about anything else that's happening outside of the Waves world. It's like something's happening on Ethereum. Sorry, I didn't hear about it. Or I like Curve. Right. I don't really know how that works. Can you explain me? So it's a pretty, people got sucked into it and they never left. It's like a black hole.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the thing. That's why, like, I'm at my bags, my stack of Waves. It just sits there because, yeah, the price is down now. But I have Sten, Sasha, Max, who's the head of BD, Olga, the CMO. I have them working for me around the clock, and I take my word for it. They're working around the clock. So whether there's a short term, I have conviction in the team. And some people, some investors, some traders definitely just pick up conviction in a team without, you know, having done due diligence or, you know, knowing the project. And, you know, like I said, 2018 really got me intrigued. But having had met the team, you know, I just let my stack sit there because I know Sten's working 20 hours a day with Sasha and Max to make sure that the next product, the next partnership goes off without a hinge. So like, you know, I say whether it's up or down, I'm sitting pretty either way. I'm smiling.
Awesome. Well, I congratulate you guys both on all the success and everything that you guys worked on, and appreciate you coming on. It was a lot of fun. You know, I learned a lot, and you know, I'm a big fan, and I know John is too. So appreciate you guys doing this, coming on. And thank you everyone who listened today. We will turn this into a podcast. It'll be on Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts and all the above, and we'll tweet it out. So appreciate it, everyone. And you guys, thanks so much. We'll chat with you backstage here.
Yeah, Joe,
Cool, thank you
John.
so